this is an exceptional opportunity we have tonight, and I just want to make sure that I don't spend too much time framing things, because frankly I don't know what the hell I'm talking about in this zone, and I really don't. I'm really in the listening mode. I have a few questions, but let's launch into AI and the new human frontier, shall we? That's the subject, that's the title of Erica Orange's book, newly released book, correct?
Yes,
Yes,
correct.
correct. And it's been beautifully received. It is chock full of information, news that you can use, and her trajectory is really quite something, and we'll hear more about it as the evening progresses. She's Rochester-based, and Erica is what is called a futurist. Most of you probably know what that is, but she looks at all manner of trends and phenomena, from blood banks and demographics to I don't know, the sale of agricultural produce in Yemen. I don't know what it is, but these trends that she looks at are so widespread, and also she is able to really focus down and distill the essence. And from all of these trends, she then pulls together and gives us a look at what the future portends, and it's really quite something. So,
as we were laughing about before, there's a psychic across the street.
Yes,
We were talking about this, and I was like, I did not sneak over there and grab the crystal ball or the tea leaves or the tarot cards, even though that might be tempting. But I love that I look out the window and there's a big psychic sign looking right at me. It feels very apropos.
They made it bigger. They just made it bigger a couple of weeks ago. And I think, I know a gentleman in the audience to my left offered to bring that psychic in, and you could do a point-counterpoint. All right, so
Round two.
I just want to cut to the chase and talk about. This is a weird time in the United States. It's a time when many, if not most of us, feel vulnerable, feel concerned at a minimum, worried, and really kind of emasculated. Not really sure that we have what we can do, how we can do, should we do, where do we do. And then beyond that is, this feeling that we have to stay in control of our lives, and we have to stay central to where we are, because our very presence, our very work, our very thinking is what we're about as a community, as a country. Concurrent with this in the United States is this. And across the world, of course, is the surge of AI, which just adds to the confusion. It's a fusion of right, but to me it's a confusion of so many elements. And this is a really difficult and also propitious time for AI, and for those who are some people who, or organizations or entities, are really using AI to their benefit and perhaps to the detriment of others. So tonight we're going to open it up and talk about all kinds of things, but I just want to tell you that we are extremely lucky and happy to have Erica Orange here, and take a bite out of what you just heard. Just go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm so happy to be here. But so let me just say this about being a futurist, because so many people will ask me, what does it even mean to be a futurist? And I made the joke obviously about the psychic parlor across the street, but so many people think that it is about prediction. And it's not ever about prediction. If anybody ever tells you that they can predict the future, they're flat out wrong. Why? Because things are happening faster than ever before, and we can create potential scenarios around where the future may be headed, but it's never really even been about prediction, right? It is about preparedness. And that's where we are today, is how do we better prepare for a future where we desperately want to cling to a roadmap? There is so much fear and trepidation and anxiety out there, and we want that roadmap, that North Star, right, to tell us where we're going, what things are going to look like, what the future of whether it's sociocultural trends, technological, economic, political, demographic, environmental, whatever it is, you name it, that roadmap to say this is where we are going and why. But that doesn't exist. Never has it existed. And really what the narrative today is that it is not going to exist anymore, because it is not just about one future, it is multiple futures, and it's not just about one reality, it's multiple realities. Now, I know this is a very conceptual thing to say, so when I say that, what I mean is, let's even, just before we delve into AI, take the experience of a young person today. And I always say, like, when I came at this book, I came at it through the lens of both a futurist, but more importantly, I am increasingly coming at the future and the future of technology through the lens of something that is more important. And that is through the lens of being a mom, and the mom to a 7-year-old who is almost 8 going on 18. It's actually crazy. But I think about the world that he is going to inherit. Now, my parenting aside, where I've made a very conscious decision to raise him in more of a play-based, tactile, real-world, sensory environment that in many cases runs counter to a lot of what I talk about with the kind of exponential rise of technological change, is the fact that for a lot of young people today, be it Gen Zers, Gen Alpha, which is the generation coming up behind very quickly behind Gen Z, they are living simultaneous existences, meaning they have one life in persona in the real world, another life in another persona in the digital, right? Social media and all of the platforms, and increasingly another life and another persona in the virtual. So when we say there's one future, straight line extrapolations and linear thinking around these things no longer apply. We have to think of time as simultaneous, and a lot of the ways in which we even think about AI influencing our lives is that it will affect different facets of our lives, our professions very differently.
Stop. We have to think about time in terms of simultaneous.
Yes?
This is, because you obviously understand what you're saying, and we are hearing this, and these are pretty choice words. Explain that.
Yes, so the whole linear notion of time, right, is based on an economy in many cases that is 3 to 4 economies ago. It is a very linear and agricultural and industrialized era way of viewing time. Just like when we think about the future of work, right, we know that so much of work is going to be hybridized, virtual, collaborative, distributed, and those old metrics of clocking in at 9 a.m., leaving at 5 p.m., repeating the cycle 5 days a week, having a weekend off, right? That's an economy that was 3 economies ago, where those delineations between geographies, time, output-based measures, right? If I can get my best work done, if we are to measure efficiency and productivity, right? Like all those things that AI is creating new urgency around, if I can create my best work on on the clock hours, then what are we truly measuring? Are we measuring creation, or are we measuring having our physical body physically somewhere where we're not tapping into our cognition truly in new and novel ways?
Wow, okay, so I have a very narrow question to ask. And this is so huge and broad, and AI affects any and everything, so I'm sure we're gonna have a million questions on whatever comes to mind. But I'm a writer, and what comes to mind is what pops up, I find it incredibly annoying, and it's really very aggressive, and it's pretty much started in the past 5-6 months. An entity that would like to write for me and inform me what I should be writing. And it's very disturbing to me. It's very disturbing to me that there's a lot out there that could actually supplant what I'm doing, because I give value to what I'm doing, otherwise I wouldn't do it. And I think that there's an originality that should be with the person, but perhaps there's some sort of generality that I'm not aware of. But it is scary to me. There's scares and they're good things. The good things, one of the good things you just discussed was the flexibility, the change in the workforce, and how accommodating AI can be, and in giving that a push. But what about the sort of the hardcore negatives?
So at its very basic level, and let's be real, like AI is not new, right? AI has been around in some rudimentary form since 1956. This didn't just drop on us out of thin air. This has been part of, just like every other cycle, something that is well understood. It's just gone through an accelerator and it's starting to leapfrog itself because it's becoming more commoditized, right? Cheaper, democratized, in the hands of more people, and it's creating all of these time-based efficiencies, right? We know this. Just like when it comes to the future of work, it's not coming to take your job, it's just coming to take over the mundane and the boring. However, we also have to remember something that I think is so critical, like such a critical piece of this puzzle, which is redefining what human agency means. What is human agency in a time when human oversight and human judgment are going to be two things that can never be disintermediated or disrupted by this technology? Now,
Stop. That was a big one, right? That was a big one. Give us that again. Into numbers.
Yep. So we can delegate a lot of stuff to the technology, right? All of the stuff that we frankly don't want to do. Manually inputting data into a spreadsheet, don't want to do that. Facets of, let's say, accounts payable and accounts receivable, all of that drudgery, a lot of the stuff, frankly, we're hired for coming out of college where we're like, this sucks. I don't want to do this kind of work. And that's why the average 30-year-old has had 7 different jobs, right? They're like, I don't want to spend my time, pardon my French, doing shit that doesn't matter. So when we go back to the drawing board and think, what does matter? What makes us uniquely human? What is not going to go onto the software, where I think artificial intelligence is actually a terrible name because it's still artificially smart, right? It's still doing the things that are just smart, when intelligence is analytical and critical thinking. It's creativity, it's problem solving, it's sense making, right? It's all of the stuff that makes us who we are. Our histories, our families, our friendships, our relationships, they all influence how we think. And we bring that thinking with us when we go into our jobs, whether we like it or not. But how do we tap deeper into those qualities? And the bigger thing is, I always say AI might have the answers, right? You might put it into all the different platforms, right? Claude, which is part of Anthropic, ChatGPT, Copilot, whatever it is that you want to use, right? And it might have the answers, but true human wisdom is about asking the questions. And the questions that we ask of AI are what is ultimately going to differentiate us from them. Questions such as, is that right? Does that make sense? Does that fit into something else that I have seen before? Or is this completely antithetical to everything? And the questions matter because we have to cultivate that same question asking in the younger generations. And I go back to what I said, and I think about this for my son who's in 2nd grade and who is increasingly at school using an iPad and getting answers to things. And he said something I was so proud recently. He goes, well, this program said that this was a fact, but I don't really know. Like, maybe it's not true. And I'm like, yes. Yes.
That's remarkable. And what's I think fierce, so what we fear is that there are folks who don't have the natural je sais quoi that your son has, right? And who just go for whatever's fed. And
well, and it's about being okay with curiosity.
But a member of our staff said, when can we go back to the time when you just can't believe everything you read on the internet?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yes. So, I mean, that dovetails into, so this, I mean, the title and subtitle of my book is very wieldly. I mean, the subtitle is Reimagining the Future of Time, Trust, and Truth. But before we get there, let me just say this when it comes to the curiosity and the question asking. I keep coming back to the same thing, which is not around human agency, which it is, but also around this question of atrophy. And I think of physical atrophy, right? They say like sitting is the new smoking. They're like, oh, get up and walk. And it's like, what happens to our muscles and our bodies and our physiology when we're just sedentary? And I think about how this applies to AI and the question we have to keep coming back to, all of us, and for any of us, honestly, who are raising kids or have full-grown kids, whatever it is how can we use AI as a catalyst for creativity and not a crutch for cognition? And what
Give us some examples on
and
that.
what I mean by that is how can we really use AI as a partner, as like a symbiotic tool to help us learn more, discover more, but not default our thinking to it. Not say, I don't know, let's just see what AI says, take what it spits out and be like, cool, good, done. No, it's not done, right? It is, how does this...
Is it a matter of education? I mean, how do you do that mind? Because the mind shift would be a U-turn at this point.
It goes back to forcing ourselves to always ask those questions. And I mean, one of my soapboxes, right, is reconceiving the future of education, which talk about something that is stuck 3-4 economies ago that was appropriate for my grandparents and great-grandparents, right? There are very few avenues for our young people to really ask those questions and to use it. It has nothing to do with cheating, right? That's one of the things that drives me crazy, right? If AI is a tool, it's not going to help students cheat. Create a lesson and an area of focus and study where they can use it as a partner and as a tool, and then elevate their own learning.
So convert the fear as an educator into using it as a tool.
Yeah.
And that's substantial. It could go a long, long way. I have. Let me ask you a point of question.
Yes.
And it's just about.
Although we need to dig into this trust and truth thing
I
too.
know, I know. Well, give us that, and then I want to ask you further on the pros and cons. Go ahead.
Oh, sure. So the trust and truth.
Oh, actually, let me ask you this question, which I think would trust and truthish.
Cool.
Which is really this is a term I don't like the trending of terms, but the weaponization of AI is actually fairly appropriate because it is hijacked and used in the most well, let's just say that the most negative ways for American politics, which should be open and a lot more organic. And now it's folks lobbying from other countries with controls of mega information systems and media.
Yeah, this is the broligarchy at play, right?
Bro,
this is this
it.
is the billionaire class controlled by tech bros at play. Now, this was always just, all right, this is happening in Silicon Valley. Like, this is an isolated thing. But now those tentacles are beginning to spread. Let's rewind. Let's rewind to talk about, let's go back to the trust and truth, where we are and where we're going, and some of the other kind of facets at play. So, when I was thinking about this whole thing around AI, I took a step back and I thought, okay, so our operating environment today is one of kind of the sense of boundarylessness. And what I mean by that is that it is becoming harder and harder to tell and differentiate the boundaries between what is real, fake, true, and false. Just like it's harder to tell increasingly what is human and what is artificial, and what is real, and what is virtual, even what is analog and what is digital, right? It's like one big cluster, you know what. And in thinking about this question, I'm like, at the same time, we don't know who or what to trust anymore when more of our surrounding ecosystem is becoming smarter. So we have all of these embedded sensors. We have the Internet of Things and intranets of things. We have the cloud. We have all of these things that are spitting all of this information at us in a time of what I call, there's so many terms, what I call algorithmic feudalism, right? I kind of go back to like the feudal lords. And it's like who or what is controlling what it is that we see, what we hear, what we're being told, what we're reading. And increasingly, it's not other people, it is the algorithms. You know, it's like you go into an Uber and they're going the speed limit even though you're running late because their boss is an algorithm. And they're like, I could get in trouble because the algorithm is telling them to drive at a certain speed. So these locus of control are starting to shift.
Give us another example, aside from Uber.
Every single thing we see in social media. It's so everything that we are algorithmically fed in our, let's say, our Facebook feeds. Instagram, we don't know. They say that AI is like a black box. So if like you open it up, you don't actually know what the inner workings are. We don't really know. There's not much transparency in our algorithms, right? It's like, I have my phone around here somewhere. It's probably going to spit some crazy stuff out of me after this presentation because it's ambiently listening to me, right? And you're like, this happened when I was pregnant. I wasn't searching for much. Facebook started feeding me all of this stuff. It just knew. It just knew I wanted something about like a baby carriage or a formula. It's like, we've all had this, right? That's algorithmic feudalism. And it's leading to polarization. It's leading to echo chambers. The fact that I think it's something like 84% of people are fed information that validates their own worldview. At the same time, that 73% of people believe what generative AI wants them to believe. So we kind of take this murky trust ecosystem, and then we think about what is the truth in a world of MD. So we know misdis and malinformation, right? That's out there. But the last D, I always add, because that is digitally derived information. These are the AI deepfakes. These, which are occurring not just visually, right? And we've all seen examples.
Give us an example.
Yes, so like how many of you saw the deepfake, I don't know, of the Pope? There's a visual I sometimes show in presentations where there was a deepfake of the Pope
And what is a deep
in a
fake?
puffy coat,
Okay.
and he was wearing like a big like blingy chain and bopping around, and like, all right, Pope is looking really baller. And this went viral, not because people thought that this was like a cool image of the Pope, but because they believed that this was real. Did a person create this image? Probably, but did they render it? No, they used AI. This was an AI generated image that tricked the brain into thinking that it was real. There are dozens of examples. There was one that went viral about Tom Cruise. There were ones of Obama, of Trump, of Zelensky, of Putin, of all of the world leaders, of all of these celebrities, right? There was one of Taylor Swift.
And so much is believed.
So I liken this to, imagine going to a carnival, right? You go to a carnival and you're walking in a fun house, and the fun house has all of these different mirrors. And that is what our operating environment is today. All of the, like where you see 100 different versions of your face, right? We are walking in a carnival fun house where all of these different realities are almost in a near real time, right? Constant, real time battle for your attention. And it doesn't even matter if that reality that is mirroring back to you is based on a truthhood or it's based on a falsity. And I say it doesn't matter because of this. We cannot prove any of these things to be real or fake anymore. And there are detection methods, but the technology is leapfrogging our ability to discern these realities.
The fake producing.
That is correct. And it's not just visually. I had this conversation with a client today that looks at the aging population, and they were talking about cybersecurity and fraud. And I said, it's not just visual deepfakes, it's audio deepfakes. It's deepfakes being able to get the voices of your loved ones and being able to exploit you for financial means, for kidnapping. So it's a very real and existential threat when the lack of proof is what puts us in this position.
So we're gonna cruise over to questions in 2 seconds. I just want to ask you to go back to this so-called weaponization of AI, and you can look at it generally if you'd like to, but tell us a bit about what you know.
Yeah, so we tend to think of imagination as just being exploited for good. You know, it's like you go to Disney and like, it's imagination and it's unfettered and it's great, and we tell our kids, imagine and play. But not all imagination is good imagination, and we see some really bad actors harnessing imagination for not very good ends. You know, as a firm, we've talked a lot about this kind of trifecta recently, which is the rise of authoritarianism, the rise of AI, and this billionaire, almost trillionaire class, a concentration of wealth we have never seen before. And it's almost as if, you're gonna laugh, I don't know why this visual just sprung into my head. It's like the scene in The Sound of Music when they're doing the puppets and they're all like behind the scenes up there doing like the goat puppets. That is exactly what is happening. All of these behind the scenes puppet masters almost pulling the strings of these technologies where we think that we can influence them, but really, which is why I said at the very beginning, we cannot predict where any of this is going to go. It's why preparedness is so important, because someone like Elon Musk can, at the drop of a hat, weaponize a system, be it AI, be it Starlink, and leverage these new kind of levers of control in ways that we haven't seen before, tapping into a global authoritarian and populist movement.
Which is
time for drinks.
Is the subject of our next piece, and is gaining real momentum globally. It's pretty arresting. We are going to questions, and we have an eager Joan McEntee. Would you like to get on the mic? Want a mic?
I think I can speak loudly enough. Erica.
Joan.
It's Erica, right?
Have we met?
Eric and I have known each other for a while.
And speak up so the mic can pick up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just we've known each other for a while, and so we tease about not knowing each other. I'm going to ask
It's really funny.
very, very basic, probably stupid questions, and many of you are far ahead of knowledge of AI versus what I have. So pardon my stupidity if that's what it is. When we talk about AI, you know, you gravitate or you grab at what you think AI is. I tended to think it was a graduate of the computerization of years ago. So when you're saying, I put something in, I ask a question of chat box or whatever it is, and something comes back, where the hell does that come from? I mean, is somebody plugging into some substance? Is it a combination of everything and it gets, you know, all of a sudden put together? A culmination of what people say and it's fed to it? I mean, I'd like an explanation of what the hell AI really is.
All right, Joan, great question. Let's go into it. So, visualize in your heads the Russian nesting dolls, the Matryoshka dolls, right? A lot of us had them as kids. The biggest doll, the one that houses all of the little ones, super basic AI. What is it? It's just a computational tool to address something that a human can do, a human task. That kind of AI has been embedded into our phones, our GPS, right? That's just kind of making us, quote unquote, smarter. The data that is being fed into the next little doll in, which is machine learning and going into the neural net, which is kind of right where the chat GPTs of the world sit, where like the fourth doll is getting into more of like the singularity, and we don't have time for that. But that is based on available training data, right? It's like we're all giving away our privacy. We're all giving away our data. Look at what Amazon just did this week, where, oh, they're going to be transparent about the fact that everything you say to your in-home smart assistant, they're just going to collect that data and save it. First of all, duh. They have been doing that the entire time. So thank you for being transparent about it. But that's training data. And a lot of the images that are online, right? It's like the pictures we upload, the things we put on social media, all of this goes into, I'm just doing this, the ether, right? It's going up there. And I actually have a chapter in the book, I call it data colonialism, because typically, and this is exploited labor in largely developing countries, they are tasked pennies, like nothing on the sub pennies, are tasked with labeling that data. And it is such deeply intensive, terrible, almost slave labor work that what is happening is they don't want to train that data anymore. So two things are going on. One, we are running out of human-fed training data. That's problem number one. Number two, we are relying on synthetic data to feed the systems. So when we don't want to tag and code that data anymore, the humans are relying on AI to do it for them. Now, we have synthetic systems training and coding synthetic systems. And if you think of what happens when the biological code becomes inbred and cyclical loops happen, a lot of what this is leading to is what could be considered data inbreeding. So just like in the genetic code, where like weird, strange malfunctions occur, the same is starting to happen in these systems.
Give us an example of data inbreeding.
I mean, it's just whatever available data. It could be images that are coded.
And the
from.
impact would be?
The impact is the degradation of that information over time, the exacerbation of certain biases. I mean, you think of what happens when like the biological code becomes inbred. It's like things just are like DNA is not really working properly. Like there's something that's not right where you're like, what's wrong with that person? The same could be said of more of these. So this is such a nerdy, super nerdy way to say this. There's a mythical creature called an Ouroboros, which is like the snake that eats its own tail. That's what one of the biggest risks is that AI will kind of eat itself and degrade over time, which layered on top of all of that are even deeper incursions into our own privacy because of the need for more human-centric training data. So while that is not the same kind of weaponization, it could be argued that it is.
Ancestries, it was 23andMe.
23andMe,
It
yep.
just went belly up. What can they, will they, could they do with that data? And how is that aided by AI?
Well, I mean, you kind of take this power nexus that I just laid out with autocracies and this, I'm going to call them even the trillionaireocracies that are starting to emerge with AI then being the other pillar. And I mean, look now at a lot of how our fundamental freedoms are under assault. There's questioning as to what constitutes as free speech. Will there be incursions into the contents of our phones? Our likes and dislikes on social media. If we liked something that is deemed inappropriate on Twitter or on Instagram? Could that sort of content be weaponized? Could our genetic data be used against us? Will that genetic data be fed into an AI algorithm and eventually affect HR hiring practices? We don't know. The overall point in all of this is this. This is a Wild West, right? So many companies will, Maggie, hi. Hi. So many companies will ask me, what are best practices or what is my roadmap? And I go back to the very beginning point. There is absolutely no roadmap. Everybody is figuring this out in almost near real time, right? There is not any industry that has this right. And everyone is even trying to figure out the human component of this. Something I talk about in the book is that the conversations are so focused around efficiencies, right? When it has to be more about reallocation and redeployment. What do I mean by that? We don't know when we can free up human time and we can free up human talent in new ways, what to do with that, how we actually tap into the strategic aspect of a lot of these. The companies that get this right, I think, will be amongst the winners. And there are a lot of things to be hopeful about. At the same time, there are dark rabbit holes that we have gone down and that we can think about. And I think about this when my husband's my business partner, and we talk about this over multiple bottles of wine in the evenings. But at the same time, will this allow us to migrate up really to that next higher order value proposition and really rethink what is it that makes us uniquely us? And how do we cultivate and reward for those things in an economy that is also evolving?
Looking around the room, I have a million questions myself. Anybody have a, yes, in the back?
Hi, yeah, I'm Emily, and first of all, I just really appreciate your work. I think as a woman and seeing a mother, and I was an educator for 13 years, progressive education is my thing, and second grade is my sweet spot. My question is to reconcile the humanity piece with the efficiency piece, especially for teaching young children. Like, are there some three bullet points that you can do? Because I feel like educators are like, so
you're asking news you can use. Gotcha.
you can use as an educator, because a lot of children, there's so many issues in the classroom, so many challenges, so many needs.
Yes.
How to keep those
Yes.
teachers curious.
Okay, we got that question.
Yes, and I've been speaking a lot recently to more kind of educational audiences, and a superintendent of a school district in upstate New York brought me in recently and wanted me to talk about the next generation, but he's like, you know what? It doesn't start with them. It has to start with the teachers, right? The teachers aren't up to date on a lot of these tools, and we also have to acknowledge that there is a very real gender gap in the use of AI. Upwards of anywhere between 13 and 15% difference between men and women's use of AI because of a lack of confidence and a fear that they're like women are going to mess it up, right? That like I'm gonna put in something incorrectly. And I think a lot of those fears are trickling down into the use of AI in some of the classrooms too. I thought recently, like, what would it look like instead of kind of the playground sandbox? It's like we had play, like PLAI, spaces in some of these schools where it's just not about using it for any sort of lesson plan, but to give kind of the unfettered access to some of these tools to answer the question, what is the technology capable of and what is it incapable of? And in answering that second question, designing relevant lesson plans that really tap into students' critical thinking in new ways. But if you're not playing around with it and asking those questions, I think one of the biggest skill sets is going to be in the discernment of everything, being discerning and not taking anything at face value when so much of their realities too are through the lens of Instagram filters. So many young girls are not only falling victim in high school to deep fake bullying, and like pornographic images made of them. But they're also trying to figure out a world where like Instagram filters are creating these really weird definitions of beauty standards too that are so unrealistic. And AI is creating this ecosystem of like, how do I even compete? So that's why I say it's not just about cheating. It's not just looking at.
Talking with Erica, I'm gonna get to these other questions, but talking with Erica about plans going forward, you really hit the nail on the head there, because it's so much about household, family, sort of how this affects us in daily living. And we'll talk more about that question right here, and then up to you.
Well,
Speak up if you could. And what's your name, please?
Carrie Whitcup.
Carrie.
So I had a great experience with AI. My son was running for Congress in Florida, and he had to answer a survey that had 100 questions from AFL-CIO. And so I worked, a few hours, answered the first 3 questions, and it took me forever. So I okay, plug it in. So sure enough, he plugged it in. I started answering the questions, and sure enough, a few sentences later was exactly what my answer would have been. So I had a hugely successful, success with AI. It worked out great for us. Anyways, but my question though is, how can you discern, like you're talking about critical thinking, what's true and what's false?
Carrie asked, how can you discern what's real and what's memorized, what's true and what's false? And actually Carrie mentioned that she had a very positive experience filling out a form. I'd be tempted to use AI with those things.
It worked out
Yes.
so unbelievable for me.
Erica.
Oh yeah, because I always say it's like the Robin to our Batman, right? It's like, it's not just a co-pilot, but it's like our sidekick. It's like the scrappy sidekick when like humans still have to be the hero with like the main character energy. But like we can use it as a tool to accomplish a lot of things in a shorter and shorter periods of time. But as we come across deepfakes, or as we come across Deepfakes are the AI manipulated images, the audio, anything that AI is creating that could pass as human. And there are some obvious examples. You look at some and you're like, that person has 6 fingers. Like, that's not okay, right? And then there are others where something viscerally, right, which is why our intuition and our sense of ingenuity too, like kind of tapping into even like that sixth sense where it's like something doesn't feel right. Or I keep going back.
Used a word,
It's being discerning. But then the bigger question longer term is, which is kind of where I dwell when I go deeper into the hole, right? Which is, if we can create synthetic media, which we know we can through AI, what will it eventually do to our ability to create synthetic realities? And will these start kind of penetrating our subconscious such that we start to question our own sense of reality? And will it have the ability to rewrite for some people their own sense of history and what they thought was true? And we're starting to see this now with people questioning even whether something like the Holocaust was
what
real.
About for your 7-year-old? How is he gonna know?
So
What
I
the question
wish.
Is Erica's 7-year-old? How would he discern?
I would love to have a clear-cut answer to this. And if I did, I would be singing it from the hilltops. I think that all of this is going to be, for every single parent, a figure it out as you go. The only thing that I can do is to tell him and to help getting him to think in ways where, does this make sense? Does this fit with what you know? To just start questioning everything, and what we have made a conscious choice to do, which is, at least while he's still under our control, is to try to limit the use of a lot of these technological tools for as long as possible, because the adoption curve is pretty fast, but to keep his mental muscle and his cognition wired more in that which can be grounded in the real world.
So is your message to
Hold on, 2 6. Sophia, sorry.
Okay, so if generative AI is a product of the Broligarchy, I can't even say this word, Broligarchy.
Oligarchy.
There you go. A black box and like a lever for techno-fascism that can be pulled at any moment. Why should we opt in and provide it our genuine human data that it's so desperate for? When, like, why would we opt in and provide it that data that it's?
And it's craving.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I go back to the point.
Everybody hear that?
Yes.
Yes? Yeah, can you repeat that?
Oh, so if the oligarchy is leading to techno-fascism, basically, why are we opting in? Why are we giving it our own data? And why are we essentially, to paraphrase, feeding the beast? Right. So I go back to what we were talking about the speeding up of change. And we have a term for this internally that we call templosion, right? The fact that these big things are happening in accelerated periods of time. But we also need to pause on that concept, because we also have to understand that while some things are moving at an exponential rate, other things are moving at a glacial pace, because not all change is fast and not everything is changing, which is why we have to get comfortable in nuance and ambiguity. And as much as a lot of people are paying attention to the privacy implications, their data, it's the counter trend to a lot of this. The other more pervasive trend is deep-seated apathy. Apathy. People frankly don't care. And there's very little questioning about how their data is used, as long as it works for them and they have basically a whole thing around convenience. It's like, give me what I want. If it gives people what they want.
How do you even know if you're opting in? I mean, isn't that sort of the part of the problem here?
I think it's part of it, but there is a conscious, like, the use of Copilot or the use of generative AI with ChatGPT to provide summaries of possibly your own writing. So you're giving it double, like, not only are you prompting it with your own thought and your own question, but you're feeding it your own writing and your writing style and your own knowledge with your own sources.
And we're part of the problem.
Yeah.
Tony,
Which is
we'll make the rounds.
Yeah, so I think the problem is kind of to what you alluded to, which is, you know, there's all this disruptions that are appropriate and necessary to the educational system, to the way that we do things at work, and all these other things. But it seems like we leapfrog to, it's appropriate to disrupt these things, and this is how, and it's already boxed up for you, and it's disrupted, and that causes the apathy. And it's like, well, they figured it out. I've had people that otherwise are incredibly, you know, super smart, critical thinkers that I've known for years, come up and be like, you know, Greenland, maybe that is a good idea. Maybe we should, you know, Canada has all these resources, like, but I know where they're getting that, you know. It's not like a novel concept. I can't.
Oh, that's the next.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes. Well, and
Yeah.
We know what you're saying.
the other point is there is a massive chasm between the pace of technological change and our ability to adapt and adjust to it. And that chasm is growing. And, you know, statistics say that by 2030, 49% of our skills are going to be obsolete. So a lot of us are left not knowing where to go, what to turn to, and when our own foundation feels unsettled, a lot of those deeper privacy concerns and like our intellectual capital, I kind of feel like that's in the purview of, I don't want to say the privilege, like that sounds so, but like in some cases that's a good problem to have, because there are a lot of people who are left thinking that they are going to be rendered completely obsolete from this next economy.
So what happens to rigor? What happens to the
What happens
critical
to
thinking?
rigor and critical thinking? And then we have one more question. And then, I hate to say it, Erica is flying off to New York. We'll get, all right, make them fast. Actually, we're gonna take all the questions at once. You have a question?
Every person in this room is opted in.
Every has adopted
Whether they
in.
like it or not.
Is AI a men's world?
Is it a men's world?
Yeah.
You didn't
In
use the word
India.
you haven't used the word regulation.
Haven't used the word regulation. All right, if you can possibly attack that in the next 4 minutes.
So, yes, and it doesn't need to be, it's just what is being funded, which is its own. So the question was, is AI a man's world? And I know some incredible women in this space,
We don't know that.
and they don't know. Yes.
There's a woman named Tara Lyons, I'm very proud of her, she worked with me for a year, and she is truly one of the leading AI specialists, running a huge thing now at Morgan, and Morgan Guarantee, yeah. Yes.
I
Sir,
was giving you my phone number, but no, regulation
We have-
and intellectual property rights.
regulation, we have 3 minutes,
Regulation and
okay.
intellectual property rights, will that slow it down?
Oh my God. So we actually should ask Deb Peacock about IP.
Yes.
But so regulation, I think the technology is always going to leapfrog our ability to regulate it, but it does bring about issues of ethics, fairness, AI, which is explainable AI. Is this AI that is transparent or accountable? Are some of those ingrained biases more obvious to us? If AI is a black box, right, like operates as a mystery, is that explainable AI kind of that Goldilocks zone, right? That like sweet spot in the middle where it's actually helpful to us. That is the goal at a time when I think all of regulation, just like everything else historically, and our inability to regulate a lot of things, particularly technology, it's always going to lag behind. And yes, unfortunately, the men who have created a lot of these systems, the Sam Altmans of the world, are now potentially more powerful than the leader of any country, save for a couple.
And on that note, you gave us, you stimulated us. We didn't solve things because there's no solutions here, but you really gave us a lot of tools and a lot of things to think about. And the questions were wonderful, and we appreciate everybody who came, and we also appreciate Anna Kate, and we appreciate Jordan Lee, and everybody who helped us put this together. So thank you very much.
Yes,
And
thank you all.
Erica's book is available. It's AI and the New Human Frontier.
Yep.
And look for Erica because she's going to be doing some interesting things.
Yeah. Thank you all so much. I wish I didn't need to go, but I
You
gotta
gotta go.
I gotta go. Yes, thank you so much for carving out some time.